Madre mía! Mana?
There's research prototypes now, which I assume are being used by intelligence agencies, of very small electronic circuits that you can just put in paper or put in paint or on the walls that are powered by the GSM stations. And they operate as the GSM radio wave passes through them. It gives them enough power for a very small amount of time to do things. It's intelligent evil dust scattered everywhere, like confetti in everything.
Smart dust is a combination of self-assembling nanomachines and components who are brought into the biosphere, who accumulate within the human body, and assemble to working units within the human body.
For what reason?
Surveillance. They can, parts of the system are taking again, it's all about light within the cell system. They take out the light from the cells exchanged between the DNA strands and turn it into an electromagnetic signal, which is detectable via satellite and ground stations. So all they need is to kind of identify your DNA fingerprint, light fingerprint, with your name, and then they can watch you 24 hours a day.
So we are running a GPS system?
Yes, yeah. Basically. This is one part. The other part is if you reverse the system, you can take an electromagnetic signal, put it into this smart dust within the body, and it will produce light and will start influencing the light exchange within the DNA system. And this can touch basically all aspects of being a human creature. It goes into the emotional part, it goes into sexuality, it goes into thoughts, so you can mind control and sex control people. You don't even realize it,
yeah, that's right.
because everything feels natural. You don't realize you are infected by the smart dust, you don't realize that somebody is influencing you because you think it's you. And suddenly you feel anger and rage, and you start a revolution out of it, and you don't know that it's kind of CIA starting the next color revolution. It is social engineering and technical engineering of our mind, and this meets together and is run by the same entities. This is part of the game, kind of. Many things that appear irrational to us. Like the discussion about genetic modified crop, the discussion about glyphosate by Monsanto, which is obviously poison as hell, and the state authorities just deny and do not do their duty to protect us from this. The opposite, we are stuffed up to here with these poisons. The way they talk about vaccinations and insist on putting mercury on top of the vaccines. And this is all part of this biological engineering, because not all the components can be sprayed, so they need certain other mechanisms to introduce certain components into our system to turn it into a biological environment that is accepting and growing these parts of the artificial biology that play a role in the self-assembling nanomachines. So it's a very complex thing, attacking from completely different sources where you wouldn't even have the idea to look for a connection. Like, how do you connect agriculture with intelligence communities, with smartness? How do you connect medical treatments, which are officially done to protect us from disease, with the interests of the intelligence community? People are doing this, messing around with our mind in a way that we are not able to put together the pictures anymore.
I've talked to a lot of people with Morgellons. First of all, it started to appear when chemtrails started to appear and people began to notice them. People are finding forms of technology in their bodies. And when you look at the descriptions of the world that's coming from people like Ray Kurzweil, he's talking about intelligent AI in the form of intelligent technology of the kind we're talking about. And there's even a name for it now. They call it smart dust, because of course everything today is smart, because everything smart connects to everything else called smart. That's what it is. It's the creation of a smart grid with all these different expressions of it. And this is clearly what is coming down in chemtrails. And it's affecting not only the human body, it's affecting the environment. Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures. What he's saying is that what they're going to do is infuse AI technology into the entirety of the environment. Well, how the hell are you going to do that except by dropping it from the sky? What we call Morgellons sufferers are people whose bodies are rejecting it. And as the body rejects it, they're having physical symptoms, and their stuff is coming out because the human immune system is trying to eject it. The end game is not only to connect the human mind to AI, but to create a completely different human being, to create a synthetic human being. This is why now they are talking publicly about the development of a synthetic genome. And I would say this is so important. Whatever you see in the public arena in terms of technological development is light years behind what's happening in the shadows. This technology has been there for a long time because it's being handed over from non-human sources. It's moving so fast in terms of the AI takeover through the technological developments because they're not developments. It's coming out of projects that are run by DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, which works with organizations like the National Security Agency and the CIA to run Silicon Valley. The idea is to create a synthetic human. Now, here's the point. This synthetic human is not planned to be male or female, and it's not planned to have the ability to procreate. And this is the real reason for the explosion in transgender everywhere. Who is the biggest target of it? Children and the young. It's being done to prepare people for when they are adults to accept this no gender human. And that's what it's all a mind game. And it's unfolding in front of our eyes.
been this demonization or vilification of Putin in our politics, our media. So I decided to look at this demonization of Putin as an institution. And what I discovered was that it rests on about 8 allegations, none of which, to my knowledge, are verifiable. The reality is that Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader, was the father of modern-day Russian democracy. In the 1990s, under Yeltsin, grievous, if not fatal blows, that's not yet clear, were dealt to the democracy that Gorbachev had created. That happened under Boris Yeltsin, who was much beloved in Washington. Not at all under Putin. 4 years ago, the American media began to refer to Putin as an autocrat. Now, the political science meaning of autocrat is a despot with absolute power who can impose his personal will as policy on a country or a political elite. We have scores of examples that Putin doesn't have that kind of power. He's the decider, but he is not a despot or an autocrat, where it's clear that Putin has to balance interests. Today's Russian political system has large components of authoritarianism in it, but also democratic components, and that Putin governs by relying on both. The kleptocratic, oligarchical elements of today's Russian economy also were created not under Putin, but under Yeltsin during the 1990s. They took the richest assets of Russia, from oil, gold, diamonds, to the railways and planes and most valuable real estate. And they privatized it, and they owned it. So Putin began slowly to take back large elements of what had been state-owned enterprises. We could argue that he created his own oligarchs who have enriched themselves. So this is a complex argument. I would just add one thing on a human level, that when the Soviet Union ended, 2/3 of the people were plunged into poverty and misery. Within a few years after Putin having come to power in 2000, those catastrophes had been undone and reversed. Russia has recovered, and more than recovered. It's grown. Most people in Russia today live, work, go about their daily business more freely and more prosperously than they ever have in Russian history. Putin wasn't a spy. He was an intelligence agent posted in Germany. Undoubtedly, it was a formative experience in his life. He was there many years. He learned to speak German fluently. I think it turned him into a European man. Putin has always been an anti-fascist. Putin is the president of what might be the largest multi-ethnic state in the world. There are people of all sorts of ethnicities living in Russia. And if Putin has one theme, it is they must not be in conflict. They must live in harmony, as he said they always have in Russia. The people who accuse Putin of being fascist is this lobby in the United States who are trying to deflect attention from the very real emergence of a fascist movement in U.S.-backed Ukraine. Nor is it true that Putin has always been anti-American. Putin has not been an aggressive leader, but a reactive leader, constantly reacting to what is seen as threats to Russia. He only acts when he's compelled to act. So the Putin I understand is a Putin who stands against a Russian leadership that would behave much more aggressively toward and in the West than has Putin.
Trump is a product of the American political system. When you strip down or strip away the buffoonery and the arrogance and the lies, and you look at the U.S. position in the world on foreign policy, Trump is basically in line with the political strategy of the empire politicians, of the elite. The world has long watched in horror as the United States has pursued its imperial march. Trump has made it okay to openly mock it. And while Trump does indeed lie about anything and everything, he simultaneously engages in the big lies.
That is why America will always choose independence and cooperation over global governance, control, and domination. I honor the right of every nation in this room to pursue its own customs, beliefs, and traditions. The United States will not tell you how to live or work or worship. We only ask that you honor our sovereignty in return.
This is a big lie. It's a lie that has been told throughout the history of the United States. The U.S. has never honored the right of nations to pursue their own customs and beliefs. The U.S. invades countries, sanctions them, bombs them, overthrows governments, interferes in elections, assassinates people across the globe. These are the lies that bind Trump to his predecessors. These are the permanent lies of the ruling elite of this country.
We have secured record funding for our military, $700 billion this year and $716 billion next year. Our military will soon be more powerful than it has ever been before.
This is a horrifying declaration. It's an abomination. It's an abomination that it's true. How is this justifiable? This is all about the politics of empire, imperialism, and in some ways, crowd control.
The United States will provide no support and recognition to the International Criminal Court. As far as America is concerned, the ICC has no jurisdiction, no legitimacy, and no authority. We will never surrender America's sovereignty to an unelected, unaccountable global bureaucracy. America is governed by Americans.
All of this sounds like crazy, unhinged nationalism, authoritarianism, laws for thee but not for me, and that is what it is. And Trump is brazenly attacking the notion that international law applies to the United States. This is the politics of empire and so-called American exceptionalism. I'm deeply concerned that we are really losing our minds in this country, with so many people falling victim to this notion that the U.S. was somehow this bastion of justice and freedom and democracy in the world. It's just not true. Trump's presidency will be like a ship that, if sunk, would place all the blame for the rot of this empire on board with it. If we want to change this country, confront its injustices, we have to always return to history and context to understand how we got here.
recently, the U.S. has continuously been escalating the trade frictions with China and has taken a series of actions that infringe China's legal rights and interests on the Taiwan issue. It's also launched groundless attacks on China's domestic and foreign policies. We believe all these have directly struck the mutual trust of the two nations and cast a shadow over the future of China and U.S. relations.
Are cell phones safe? Well, a new investigation by the Nation suggests that's a question that cell phone giants prefer you don't ask. The article by journalists Mark Hertzgaard and Mark Dowie is headlined, "How Big Wireless Made Us Think That Cell Phones Are Safe."
Our piece is an investigative expose showing you how the cellular industry has worked for 25 years behind the scenes to convince you that cell phones are safe, when in fact, if you look at the independently funded science, the picture is a lot more mixed than that. There's that smoking gun letter, I should say, from George Carlo in 1999 telling the CEOs of all these big companies, look, this stuff is raising serious questions, especially about kids and cancer and genetic damage. And I think that's the real parallel with both big oil and big tobacco. In each case, these big companies were told privately by their own scientists that there's serious questions about your product, whether it be cigarettes or fossil fuels or cell phones. And in each case, those executives decided not to share that with the public, but rather to keep that information to themselves while telling the public and telling the press and telling policymakers there's no problem.
Our industry has gone out and aggressively asked the question, can we find a problem? And the answer that has come back is that there is nothing that has come up in the research that suggests that there is a linkage between the use of a wireless phone and health effects.
To say that they found no such evidence, that was an absolute lie. The term that they use is wargaming. They have wargamed the science. That comes from an internal memo in 1994 from Motorola. Wargaming means a number of different things. It means funding science that is friendly to industry. It means discrediting science or attempting to discredit scientists that are critical of industry. And it means trying to put industry-friendly scientists on key advisory boards, such as the World Health Organization. The main thing you can do as a consumer is to minimize your use of your cell phone. Use a landline telephone whenever you can. And if you must use a cell phone, always use earbuds and use it for as little time as possible. Don't go on and on. Have your phone call and complete it. And yes, texting is better than a phone call in terms of the amount of radiation you're exposed to. And also, the moment of the connection of the call is when there is the biggest surge of radiation. That is, after you've dialed and you hear it ringing and then it connects to the other phone, at that moment, hold that phone away from you. The farther away it is from your skull, the less radiation that is going to be touching you. Part of the reason that we're down this road the way we are so far is that we did not test cell phones back in the 1980s before they went on the consumer market. And we're about to make that same mistake again with 5G technology. 5G technology is what will be required if we go to this thing called the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is the idea of your smartphone being connected to your smart car and your smart household so that all of your appliances, your cell phones, your computers, everything will be connected 24/7. The wireless companies deliberately addicted people to this technology. And they were told 20 years ago that this could cause cancer in kids. And they kept doing it. Think about that.
Wi-Fi broadcasts at 2.4 gigahertz. Out of the trillions of frequencies out there, that is the exact one that causes the water molecules to heat up. But that's a vibration, and that vibrates everything in the human body. And it also results in electromagnetic fields being generated in the body. And when we're full of metals, like the metals that are being sprayed on us from the sky that's modifying the weather and modifying us, it's basically getting the metals into us to make us into conductive, reflective parts of the grid. But there's a new Wi-Fi coming, and it's called WiGig. And the new WiGig broadcasts in the millimeter band 60 gigahertz. It just so happens that this frequency they're going to use for the new Wi-Fi is the exact frequency at which the oxygen molecules begin absorbing. Now, why is this significant? Your body pulls oxygen out of the air, and it binds to a compound in your blood called hemoglobin. When you hit these oxygen molecules with this electromagnetic frequency, that affects the hemoglobin's ability to bind the oxygen. This is a serious problem because what happens when you're in a field of 60 gigahertz emissions and you're breathing that air, your body is not getting the oxygen to carry to the cells. The possibilities for inducing illness are endless. Then you combine this with the following. We've got smart meters outside. Those are broadcasting. You've got the cordless phones. You've got the cell phones. You've got this Internet of Things that's coming. But here's the problem. Those are the crowd control frequencies. Those are the frequencies that have been used and developed by the military to make people collapse, make people hear voices, make people pass out and lose the use of their extremities, burn their skin. And what we're going to have is that they're going to induce these bizarre illnesses with these frequency manipulations. I believe they're going to use that as a pretext for forced vaccination. You don't have to use wireless. Wireless is not necessary. You need to unplug all your wireless devices in your home. Hardwire your home. Go back to Ethernet connectivity. Hook up the cables to your computers. Another thing, the microwave exposure from the Wi-Fi creates an insomnia condition because it suppresses melatonin, tricking the body into thinking it's still daylight. So it doesn't secrete the sleep hormone. This stuff is stealth. I mean, people are not aware. This is an invisible weapon. And I believe what's happening right now is another attempt to bring the next level to fruition, and that is to induce illness on the unsuspecting masses. Now, all of this ties into an agenda to cull humanity and get us under their thumb with medical tyranny and reducing us to being sick and servile.
Using the EMFs to open up the blood-brain barrier. So think about all the nanoparticles that they're putting in the chemtrails, the nanoparticles that they're putting in flu shots, vaccinations that are in the air. You can have biochips in the nanoparticle size. Then you can control those. But the problem there is, how do you get those into everybody's brain? Well, guess what? You do it through EMFs. So the electromagnetic frequencies make the blood-brain barrier permeable at even low doses. So not only do they make the brain permeable, but they also make the gut membrane permeable as well. Kids putting their iPad on their belly can sterilize little girls, and it actually hardens their eggs and prevents them from becoming pregnant later on. Now think about that. So how is that girl going to get pregnant 30 years from now? Well, the only way they're going to be able to get pregnant is through in vitro fertilization, right? It's focused in connection with Agenda 21. It's the silent warfare that's going on.
This modem is innocently sitting here, apparently doing nothing. However, when we turn on the radio frequency meter, it is measuring the transmission of the wireless coming out of this modem. And you can see that the peak signal strength on the left column of this meter is at almost 6 volts per meter. That's as high as it goes. These are extremely dangerous readings of radio frequency radiation going through my body, and we're wondering why we're dizzy, nauseous, we have headaches, we have fatigue. This is what we're exposing ourselves to, sitting here working on the computer with a wireless modem. What I've done is I've plugged my Ethernet cord. I've plugged the other side of it right here into the computer. Alright, so now I'm hardwired. Everything's okay. Let me turn on the acoustometer, the radio frequency meter. Well, look at this. What's that all about? The readings are still coming off the modem. Let me show you something very important here. This is the AT&T website where I need to go to actually disable the modem. So I go up here, I turn it off, I save it, and now look what happens to the acoustometer. It's still on, and there's no reading. See, now the wireless modem is disabled. So please don't think that with your modem, just because you have an Ethernet cord plugged into it, that the wireless function is disabled. It's very important to disable the wireless function through the software, or you need to call your internet service provider and ask them how to do it. This will really help your health. I can't emphasize this enough.
Yo, what is that? There's like 5 things, bros.
That's awesome. I don't know what it is.
Bro, I just want to go up to it and see what it is.
Look, bro.
That's so close!
What is happening? Our sun is huge in this story, okay? What's going on in the sun is affecting all the planets in the solar system. What they shut down the observatories over has to do with communicating with ETs. There are craft near the sun that were affecting the sun, supposedly, to create or stop a certain frequency from hitting the Earth, and that this was being photographed by all the observatories, not just one. That's why the so-called FBI was brought in to shut down the one in New Mexico, but it's not the only one. There's 7 of them.
Was there ever a UFO reality that was acknowledged by the United States government, military intelligence community? And if so, as people had claimed, then where is it in our official history? Why was it never in any academic history book that I ever read? We encounter our mainstream establishment media, and you often hear it said, what if they're out there? As if this is how you treat the UFO phenomenon. Edgar Mitchell was a very amazing man. He made multiple public statements explicitly about how he was told of crash retrievals and the possession of alien bodies and technology at the deep, deep levels of the U.S. national security apparatus. And he said this publicly, and no one in the mainstream corporate media was really willing to explore that at all. The reality is that someone is here with technology that's not supposed to exist, but it does exist. We know that it's the case in the form of released U.S. government declassified documents. You know, he had one contact who basically said, look, what we have out there is better than Star Trek, Star Wars, or anything you can see in the movies. There's a major effort to conceal that reality. There's a major effort to replicate radically advanced technology. And it's radically advanced technology that's of an incalculable, possibly, value. Let's just say immense value. Any object that can zigzag, any object that can stop on a dime, that can take off instantly, that has triangles that are larger than multiple football fields. All right, there's a lot of energy and infrastructure going into that, and it should matter to all of us. This is an expensive cover-up. Sometimes people think, well, why does it matter? It doesn't affect my life. It does affect your life. Because money is siphoned out of your society to pay for this. It's like there's a big hole in our global financial system, and the window's open, and the money is just flying out, paying for this. The UFO cover-up has to function on a corrupt system. It can't function any other way. So it requires a black budget. So you may have heard that the Pentagon and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, lost, misplaced, unauthorized spending of $21 trillion. That amount is actually equal to the entire debt of the United States of America. So the question is, where's that money going? One answer is it's going underground, and one answer is it's going off-world. There's at least 100 fully functioning deep underground bases in the US alone. Some people say, well, why do we need governments to give us disclosure? We know the truth. Okay, that's the case, but it does matter. It will always matter. Disclosure of the reality of this phenomenon by official government sources remains very, very important. Not so that we know the truth. That's actually secondary. The main reason is so that they are responsible to us. That's the number one reason. So I think the goal is a long night of global totalitarianism. That's what we're moving toward unless we do anything to stop it. And our job is to stop it. Our job is to confront it. So the way that we can do it, and this is something that all of us can do, is to be brave and to recognize that there's a problem. I believe in disclosure. I've never stopped believing in it, but I've never believed that disclosure will be done in an honest way. I think disclosure of the UFO reality will only be done, ever only be done, in a way where those people with the power and the secrecy are forced by events. A dedicated, committed, ethical minority can actually transform this world. The fact is, we're never really going to get to where we need to be without some dramatic changes. The way it is right now, we're in this kind of enforced system of childhood. And we're never going to get to adults until we actually rip some of these illusions away from us.
clinical psychology, you're taught how to assess what's wrong with a person. But in the psychological system that mindfulness comes from, it's all about what could be right, what we can develop, what we can cultivate, equanimity, compassion, caring about other people. If you do a mindfulness or insight practice or Zen, you're much more present, moment to moment. When you multitask, the brain does not do that, just does one thing at a time. It switches very rapidly. It's a fiction that we do several things in parallel. And if you were concentrating on that one really important thing you have to do today, and your concentration is up here, and then you think, oh, I better check my email. People check email more than 70 times a day on average. Or I'll do this and this and this and this. And you start surfing or wandering Facebook, and then you say, oh yeah, I have to do that thing. When you go back to it, ordinarily your concentration that was up here is now down here. Unless it turns out you did 10 minutes of mindfulness of the breath. Another benefit is the recovery from stress. The scientific way of thinking about stress and resilience is what's the peak of the cortisol and how long does it take to return to calm? That's the operational definition of resilience. And the longer you've been a meditator, it seems, the quicker that recovery becomes. The longer you've been a meditator, generally, the stronger the benefits become. So there's an attentional benefit, a stress benefit. One of the things that we're a little bemused by is that all of the spiritual traditions from which these meditation practices have come to America talk about how important it is to be selfless, to deconstruct the self, not to be I, me, mine focused. That turns out to be the least studied phenomena in all of the meditation research. Somehow in this culture, we don't really care that much about it. We rather increase our attention, our focus, recover better from stress. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a good thing if you're stressed and you're distracted. But it turns out there's a higher goal that is not often talked about. There's a remarkable effect with the loving kindness meditation. So in loving kindness, you wish well yourself and people you love and people you know in an ever-expanding circle. And it turns out this has very beneficial effects on the brain. And in fact, the research on practices that encourage a loving attitude seem to have a more powerful effect right at the beginning than any other kind of meditation. It's as though the mind wanted to learn to love better. This is very important, I think, for society, for our lives, for our communities, for our families. We put our children in an environment every day where they're rewarded individually for doing better than other kids. And so kids become competitive and very self-centered. A book I wrote, Emotional Intelligence, was really an argument for teaching kids social and emotional skills in school. Meditation of every kind, mindfulness included, is mental fitness. We put a lot of time into physical fitness, but think about making the mind stronger, strengthening attention, strengthening your simple ability to control what's going on in your mind. And I don't think it's just attention we should help kids with. I think that we should help them with compassion, with caring. I also happen to think we should teach them systems thinking, because this generation of children is going to encounter a world where the systems we take for granted, like the environment, are going out of control. Going to need to be pretty sophisticated in how they handle it. Therapies that are based on mindfulness, like there's one called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, turn out to be as effective for anxiety and depression as medications. Now, you may not have heard that before, and there's a good reason. No pharmaceutical company will make a penny from this fact. However, it's important to know. So mindfulness and meditation is a mental fitness exercise and mental fitness practice, I think, should become universal.